What's going on, guys? My name is Steve. Thank you for stopping by my channel. Today we're going to be reacting to American versus British comedy. Which is better? This video was recommended to me in the comments section of a previous video. I don't really have a lot of experience when it comes to British comedy. I think on this channel I probably reacted to a handful or so of comedy-related videos. Two of those were Ricky Gervais, and then a few others are thrown in as well. Most of the comedy-related videos I've done since I started this channel were in the form of things like funny adverts and stuff like that. Generally, I have much more experience with American comedy. Like I said, I have very little experience with British comedy, but in American comedy, I've never really found stand-up comedy to be my favorite form of comedy. Don't get me wrong, I do like some stand-up every once in a while, but it has to be someone who is hilarious for me to really find it funny. I definitely find more humor in kind of accidental comedy and things like that. I also love things like funny adverts and just different things like that. When it comes to British comedy throughout my life, I've definitely caught bits and pieces here or there in the form of British TV shows, and maybe at some point I've caught a few British movies every once in a while. Actually, I know I have every once in a while, but it's definitely not something I've sat down and spent a large amount of time watching. I've just never really, took the opportunity to do so up until now. This is definitely something I want to explore more on my channel than I have thus far. And I thought this would be a really good video to kind of maybe guide me in the right direction and to see what they have to say about the differences between American and British comedy, and tell me why one may be better than the other. I know a lot of people in the comment section of certain videos of mine have talked about how much more they enjoy British comedy than American comedy. They say it's completely different, and I kind of want to learn what they mean by that. I kind of want to know what are those differences. But one show that pops in my mind that I did spend a lot of time watching when I was a kid was Mr. Bean. Me and my grandma would sit down every Sunday afternoon and turn on PBS, which is the public broadcasting station, and we would sit there and watch Mr. Bean. And I have really, really fond memories of that time, not just because I was spending time with my grandma, but because as a kid, I absolutely loved Mr. Bean. I thought he was hilarious. I don't really know what you call that type of comedy, but I definitely enjoyed him. Since I was a kid, I haven't caught any more of his videos or anything, so I don't know if I would like the rest of his stuff, but I definitely enjoyed the episodes of Mr. Bean I saw as a kid. There was another show that come on PBS, and I don't remember what it was. It was a British show where all I can remember about it was they were in like a department store or something. So let me know in the comments section, guys, if you know what I'm talking about. It was on the public broadcasting station in the US, and it was where these people were in a department store. And I cannot remember what it was called. I didn't catch all those episodes at all, but I definitely caught those episodes from time to time. Another British show, comedy show I have watched was An Idiot Abroad. I didn't catch all those episodes, but I definitely caught a number of them, and I thought Carl Pilkington was hilarious in that show. And obviously, so far at least, I definitely like Ricky Gervais. The little bit I've seen of him, I've checked out, I think, 2 of his videos on here. They weren't really his stand-up. One of them was when he was hosting the Oscars, I believe, and another was just a compilation of him being funny in interviews and whatnot. But I think I like him. But all in all, guys, like I was saying, I don't have a ton of experience with British comedy, so I'm very interested to check this video out. So let's go ahead and dive in and check out American versus British comedy. Which is better?
What is the difference between British and American humour? A lot of people out there believe it's down to optimism and pessimism. Many think that naturally Americans are more hopeful, so as a result their media is more happy. And the British are, well, miserable, so we like to see the world burn, which is reflected in how often sad and dark a lot of our media is. Now, there is some truth to that, but if you were to ask me, that's only scratching the surface, and while it is correct, it's only a fragment of a larger picture, and
I don't know if I agree with that. Granted, I haven't seen a lot of British media, only, bits and pieces, clips here or there, but I just feel like the media in the US is so negative and so pessimistic. There is no way your media in the UK is more negative and pessimistic than it is in the US. I'd be shocked if that's the case. Let me know in the comments, guys, if you feel like what he said is accurate and that your media is actually more negative and pessimistic than the media we have in the US. That would be actually pretty shocking to me, to say the least.
It's kind of misleading, because using that logic, American people are more happy than the British are, but according to a 2018 census by the UN, the happiness levels in the UK and the US are almost identical. In
That's
fact,
surprising
they're so similar,
how close we are there.
dead next to each other when compared to every other country in the world. So when people say that the difference in humour is because America is more happy than Britain, well, it's just not true, because nowadays we're all as depressed as each other. That was British humour right there. Quite dry, pessimistic and self-deprecating, where the victim of the joke is myself, the joke teller, as I say it. Now, in the UK, if you make a joke similar to that about, for example, how bad your grades are at school, it would probably be received with quite a few laughs, but if you made the exact same joke in America, a lot of people might be genuinely worried and think that you lack confidence in yourself. Some wouldn't even recognise that you're making a joke at all. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It just
that reminds me of something. Based off of certain comments, I think I get what he's saying there, and it's that Americans, we tend to take things more literally. We kind of are we believe, I guess we say what we mean, and I think maybe British people are not always as literal as we tend to be in the U.S. Let me know if you think that's accurate as well.
Highlights the difference between the two cultures, but I think a great place to start off and break down how they're so different is by comparing the average British sitcom and the average American sitcom, and there really are some very interesting differences. One of the biggest is in how almost all British comedies, it ends in disaster. Take Fawlty Towers or Blackadder, for example, two of the most popular British comedies ever made. Every single episode of both of those shows, without exception, ends in total disaster. The protagonist will have a task, he will try to complete that task, and just when all seems well, everything goes horribly wrong, and it ends with, quite frankly, an unhappy ending. For example, in one episode of Fawlty Towers, there's a health inspector having a look at the hotel, all the while there's a rat on the loose and the staff are trying to catch it, and after a huge amount of effort and shenanigans and some very close calls, they finally catch the rat and all is well, except the last shot of the episode is the protagonist pulling off the lid of the biscuit tin to the inspector for the rat to be munching on the biscuits, leaving the audience to imagine what kind of awful consequences are going to happen. Or in Blackadder, where one episode he has to rat out a German spy in the field hospital.
There's a German spy in the hospital, and it's my job to find him.
And all seems well. In the end, he's caught the spy and she's off to be shot by firing squad without a trial, except just at the last moment, it's revealed that there was no spy, it was all just a misunderstanding, and Blackadder just sent an innocent nurse off to be executed. And the final moments are of him learning that alongside his fellow officer who hates him, as they both dash off to tell the commander, leaving us all to imagine what dire consequences Blackadder is going to face. I mean, the very last episode of Blackadder ends with all the characters going over the top and dying. I mean, it doesn't get much more depressing than that.
Okay, yeah, that is interesting. So what he's saying, we haven't got to the American part here yet, but so far what it seems like he's saying is that at least, I don't know if all British comedies, but a lot of British comedies end in some sort of a negative thing happening in a comedic way. That's interesting. Yeah, I can't think of a comedy in the U.S. in like the comedies ending like that. Usually comedies in the U.S., I believe I'm thinking correctly, they usually end in a happy ending. That's crazy. That's weird. Okay, let's see what he says about the American part.
But when you look to the other side of the Atlantic, you do see more hopeful shows. It's quite common for American sitcoms to end happily, for there to be a great emotional catharsis, to not so much leave the audience laughing in tears like the British do, but rather more inclined to leave the audience with actual tears. For example, in The American Office, Michael and Dwight are two characters who have a very bitter, hate-filled relationship, except when Michael leaves the show, he leaves Dwight with a letter of recommendation, and this happens.
To whom it may concern. Good, real personal. Thanks, Michael. The dictionary defines superlative as of the highest kind, quality, or order. I define it as Dwight Schrute. As a sales executive, as a man, and as a friend, he is of the highest kind, quality, supreme.
And the character realises in that moment just how much he grossly underestimated how much Michael means to him, and it creates this powerful revelation that brings the audience to tears. There is nothing wrong with that approach to comedy. Futurama is a cartoon comedy. You wouldn't expect there to be these heartwarming moments that bring the audience to tears, but a huge amount of episodes tug at the heartstrings. For example, Fry becomes a master musician with a fictional instrument and becomes beloved by the public, but when he loses his talent at the end of the episode, everyone leaves his concert except for one.
Please don't stop playing, Fry. I want to hear how it ends.
And then his girlfriend stays behind and watches his performance, because she truly doesn't care how talented a player he is. She only cares about making him happy. That is a really satisfying ending, and you could bet that if Futurama were a British comedy, that episode would have ended in total disaster where even his girlfriend left him in the end. American comedy is just more happy than British comedy, and that's no real secret, and from a certain way of thinking, it's a flaw with British comedy, as
That is a secret to me. I mean, as someone who hasn't experienced a lot of British comedy, I had never thought about that. I'd never thought about the fact American comedy was overly happy or optimistic or something. I guess that's because I'm just mostly used to it. So do you guys that have experience with both British and American comedy, do you feel that what he's saying is accurate, that, British comedy tends to have a little bit more mayhem at the end, so to speak, a little bit more, not quite as optimistic as American comedies tend to be?
characters are often denied that ability to be real, to create genuine emotion in the audience. The IT Crowd is a very funny British comedy, but I just can't imagine one of those characters having a serious heart-to-heart with one another. They just aren't given that chance. Now, it's one thing to talk about how the two styles of comedy are different, but in this video, I want to do something more. I want to address a side of the argument that has never been really talked about. I want to try and explain why they're different, why Americans enjoy happy shows and why the British don't so much. And if you ask me, humour is a construct of culture. The culture of a country has a massive effect on the sense of humour that country has, and few things affect culture more than the news.
Wait, so he's saying British people on average don't enjoy happy shows? I find that hard to believe that you guys wouldn't enjoy happy shows. Who doesn't like a happy show? I mean, I don't know. I mean, a happy show leads you to feeling happy. So I would feel like everybody would want to, feel happy. I don't know. This is interesting. This is very interesting. I'm going to have to keep this in mind as I explore British comedy and see if I see that difference.
Now, this next bit is no great social theory or proven idea, it's just my own opinion, so take it as you will. But in my opinion, one of the biggest things that affects the fact Americans prefer their media to be happy is because of the news, or more specifically, because the news in the USA is so dark and fearful.
It's no secret to anybody that the news is just a constant battering ram of fear-mongering.
Yes, that's what I was talking about.
If you want to be terrified, there's never-ending coverage that can make you scared shitless.
Now, it's no secret that there is a massive fundamental difference between the news and...
That's what I was talking about by negative when I was talking about the media in the U.S. pessimistic. Because he said it was happy, or what did he say? Optimistic. I don't remember exactly how he described it compared to British media, but it's like, no way. Everything about American media is fear-based, and it's just like constant fear narrative coming at you 24 hours a day. You know, I don't watch that stuff, man, because it's just like constant. It's just in your face, fear, fear, fear. You know, just horrible stuff they try to promote. So I'm trying to gauge what he means by happy, because that is not happy, obviously. So I'm trying to see what he means by the media is happy. Maybe it's just when they aren't talking about the pessimistic stuff. Maybe the anchors tend to be more bubbly and happy. Maybe so. Maybe that's what he's talking about, because that does seem to be the case, I think. But this is interesting.
In the UK and the news in the US, and in my opinion, it's a difference so important that it actually affects the taste in media those two cultures have. When you actually sit down in England to watch the evening news, you realise something. It's cold. They will address the day's news in a detached way. The anchor will read out the news emotionless from the teleprompter, almost
Really?
like a very good text-to-speech program, and will never directly say their own opinion to the audience. That's something you would be, well, let's say, hard-pressed to find in US news.
Yeah,
they will rarely sensationalise stories, and to be honest, watching the news in the UK is kind of boring. The thing about the BBC News is, like it or hate it, it's state-funded, which means two important things. They're non-profit, and thusly they don't run ads. The people telling the news on TV in the UK are not incentivised to make money. They really don't care how many people tune in and watch every day. However, in the US, it's the exact opposite. When you look at CNN, Fox, and all the other news providers, they are private companies. Above all else, they want to make money.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
they run ads. The number of viewers they have directly links to how much money they earn, so those news sources are heavily incentivized to sensationalize the news, to in all respects make the people afraid, because when the people are afraid, what do? They watch the news even more, which means those companies earn much more money. As a great example, you can look at how back in 2014, the Ebola virus was starting to spread, and it was a big worry for many people.
That reminds me, someone recommended a clip of, I think it was a stand-up comedian, and I bookmarked that clip for later, but it was, I think it was the difference between how they shared the Ebola news in the US versus UK, and supposedly it's insane, the difference. I'm going to check that out now that he mentions it here.
Is how that viral outbreak was covered in the UK.
Oh, well, I guess we'll see.
Hundreds of British troops are being sent to West Africa.
A small number of cases will reach the UK.
We can contain it.
Britain is at the forefront of preventing the spread.
A message for the public. Don't worry.
And here is how that exact same story, in the USA, in a country just as well equipped to stop a viral outbreak as the UK, was covered.
Fox News alert now, the Ebola emergency here in America.
The killer virus.
Spreading much faster than efforts to contain it. Spiraling out of control.
Stop admitting West Africans into America right now.
All hell is about to break loose.
That's that video right there.
The difference is uncanny.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about, guys. I think some people have wondered why I've been so harsh on the media, because on numerous videos I've said I don't touch the media. I can't stand the media. And that right there is why. Because they take something that anybody who's paying attention otherwise knows is not that big a deal, or not such a big deal that people need to panic. Obviously, someone had Ebola, that would have been, it was horrible. You don't want something like that. But the point is, they do that with every single story. They sensationalize it in the US and they make it way bigger than it is, and they just scare a bunch of people, and people that aren't paying attention otherwise. They take things, way overboard, and they get fearful. And it's just like, you got to cut the TV off in the US. You got to cut the news off, because you will live in fear if you constantly watching the media here, because that's what they do. That's their job, right? They're trying to make money, and fear sells. It absolutely does.
And the reason why is really quite simple. If you're worried about something, you switch on the news and they say everything is fine, don't worry about it, then you'll probably switch off and go do something else.
Right?
But if
Makes
the news
sense.
is saying that everything is spiraling out of control and heavily implying that that deadly virus will be at your front door soon, and because you keep watching, you spend more time watching their adverts, which means more money goes into their pockets.
Immigrants are trying to take your job and kids and terrorists are coming to blow up your Ford Focus in particular.
Now, this all comes back to comedy, to why Americans enjoy happy movies and happy comedies so much more than the British do. And my theory is that it's all a result of that culture, of that, well, fear culture. Because due to the rather, well, intentionally toxic messages American news spreads,
makes
makes the people more fearful, more distrusting, more paranoid. But in the UK, that kind of news coverage is so much more rare, and that results in the American people having a proclivity to escapism. They want to lose themselves in the happy fantasy of their media to escape from that culture of fear the news works so hard to create. And I think what's quite interesting on that point is the straight man. He or she is a character in comedy where they are totally normal, when every other character is stupid or naive or has a massive ego or any other character flaw. That straight man has no flaws. Very often you'll see this take the form of the wisecracker, someone who is always incredibly witty, always has some clever one-liner or something funny to say, and there is no better example of the wisecracker than in Seinfeld. The protagonist Seinfeld is a near-perfect character, and he fills that role of the wisecracker like a glove.
Name, please.
Seinfeld, you made a reservation for a mid-size, and she's a small. I'm kidding around, of course.
Unfortunately, we ran out of cars.
But the reservation keeps the car here. That's why you have the reservations.
I know why we have reservations.
I don't think you do.
In Seinfeld, the protagonist is exceptionally witty. He always has something clever to say, and this comes back to the whole notion of the straight man. The idea of that character in comedy who is normal and has no big character flaws, where the butt of the joke is not him, but more so the people around him. And it's a pretty common trope in American comedies. For example, Michael in Arrested Development, where everyone in his family is seemingly insane except for him.
Why does everybody think that I'm scared of girls?
Because you're a chicken.
Cuckoo-ca-cha! Cuckoo-ca-cha! What are you doing?
Michael and women? A cuckoo-ca-cha! That's what I was...
Has anyone in this family ever even seen a chicken?
But in British comedies, such a character is very rare. Now, there are exceptions on both sides. For example, Parks and Recreation is an American comedy with no real straight man. Everyone in that show is flawed. For example, Leslie, the woman who is desperately naive. April, the intern, who's nihilistic and hates everyone. Ron, the guy who is... okay, I have no clue how to describe Ron Swanson.
Hi, my Yorkshire Terrier has chewed up the legs on my kitchen table. Is there a cheap way to repair that?
Great question. Ditch the terrier and get yourself a proper dog. Any dog under 50 pounds is a cat, and cats are pointless.
And that straight man trope is one that's pretty popular in America, and it's pretty rare in Britain, and I think that's an extension of that escapism. As Stephen Fry once excellently put it,
the American comic hero is a wisecracker who is above his material and who is above the idiots around him. All the great British comic heroes are people who want life to be better and on whom life craps from a terrible height, and whose sense of dignity is constantly compromised by the world letting them down. In a sense, comedy is the microcosm that allows us to examine the entire difference between our two cultures.
The thing about a straight man is that they are more than just a character. They do more than just create comedy, because in a sense, they're a vessel for the audience to project themselves onto. On a subconscious level, when you see a wisecracker saying funny one-liners and putting customer service people into their place, on a subconscious level, the audience projects themselves onto that character, which assists in that escapism. And that example of Seinfeld tearing apart the customer service, I think it's a wonderful reflection of that idea. Everyone has had crappy experiences with customer service, but in this scene, Seinfeld does what we all wish we had done. With witty comebacks, he essentially destroys the employee's dignity and outlines in great detail why they've done their job wrong.
So you know how to take the reservation, you just don't know how to hold the reservation. And that's really the most important part of the reservation. Anybody can just take them.
Again, there is nothing wrong with that style of comedy, as it is just that, a style of humour that's no worse or better than the others. But what do you think? Am I right? Or is the real difference between British and American comedy something else entirely? I'd love to know what you think in the comments down below.
Alright guys, this was interesting. I never knew we had so many differences between American and British comedy. I think what he was basically trying to say here is that in America, our media is so fear-based that when we go out to watch a comedy movie or a comedy TV show, we generally want to have an escape from that fear. So we look for comedy movies and TV shows that are going to be a little bit more happy, uplifting, and have a happy ending, so to speak, and are kind of a little bit more optimistic than what you may find in British comedy. And, you know, this actually explains a lot, because I've had a lot of people in the comments section that were British tell me that British comedy tends to be a little bit more dry. And I think that would be the reason for it. You guys aren't constantly bombarded with as many fear messages on a daily basis from your media as we tend to be in America. So if that is the case, and that's accurate, which, you know, based off what he said here, I think he's probably right, that would explain a lot. Let me know in the comments section, guys, if you think all of this is accurate and explains the difference between American and British comedy. I'd also like to hear what you think some of the other differences between American and British comedy are, because I know that there are definitely a lot more differences, even though I haven't really explored British comedy, you know, considering that, you know, I know there's two different complete styles here. There has to be many more differences to those styles. So please, guys, let me know what you think are the most interesting differences between American and British comedy. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for stopping by. Please click that like button. Feel free to drop your comments or suggestions about this video or others. And don't forget to subscribe to continue to follow me on my journey to discover my British and Irish ancestry. Until next time, guys, peace.